There's been mixed reaction to the revelations by Home Affairs Minister Schreiber that South Africa spent around 52 million rand to deport over 19,000 foreign nationals who were in the country illegally. Now, Schreiber was responding in writing to economic freedom fighters' questions in Parliament. Now, the African Transformation Movement says that this money could have been better spent addressing the root causes of the country's immigration crisis. Let's now speak to ATM's President, Vuyo Zungula. Good evening to you and thank you so much for your time. You say this is a waste of resources. Why?
Look, if the system that allows people who come to the country illegally to continue, it means we are going to keep on spending money because we've not addressed the entry or exit parts of our country. So our view as the ATM is that there needs to be, the government needs to focus on dealing with corruption amongst the Home Affairs officials that are stationed by the borders, and needs to build capacity for a track and trace system so that if a person comes in the country, there's a system that determines whether this person is here illegally, how long they are allowed to stay here, so that they are able to be, to be taken and to be deported if they overstay their welcome. You will recall that there's a guy from Japan. He spent 17 years in our country, not traced, simply because he was running away from Japan because he committed a crime there in Japan. But how could a person who was a fugitive of justice in Japan is able to stay for 17 years in our country without our systems in our country to track whether this person, number one, is in the country, what is the conditions of his stay here? And also we've got places whereby there's basically no borders. A person can easily jump. So without addressing those things, we are going to continue spending so much money. And again, there needs to be conversation with the Department of International Relations with these countries, because if you are going to have millions and millions of people coming from same countries coming to South Africa, the countries must take responsibility. It can't be that South Africa alone is going to spend so much money, but those countries are not going to be held accountable.
So you are taking it back to the conversation around the fence, the border fence as well, because at some point we were sitting with a fence that cost the country millions, and even some of the MPs going to inspect it and simply not being happy with what they found. Definitely,
there needs to be a proper border system, just like a person has in their own home, whereby there's a proper gate, there's a proper fence, so that a person can know if a person comes inside, these are the proper channels for a person to come inside the country. So we're saying similarly, the same thing must happen in our country, because if you have a case whereby there is illegal immigration that is not controlled, you are going to have instances whereby people end up taking the law into their own hands, because you are going to have cases whereby people commit murder, people commit crimes coming from other countries. They can easily skip the country, they can easily move from one area to another, and the people who are victims will never get justice. Those who are, pardon me for coming in there, but those who are defending the minister are saying that what did you expect him to do? Because ultimately, if he finds people in the country illegally, he is doing something about this and sending them back. So what would you have rather had him do? Keep these people in the country? No. We're not saying they must be kept in the country. We're saying that over and above. So it would have been understandable for the minister to say, this is the amount we've spent and the amount of people that we've deported, over and above dealing with the issue of illegal immigration. Should the amount have been at 52 million though? It's roughly 3,000 per person, which is quite not really an excessive amount if you look at how much travel costs are in the country. Mm.
But one would argue then that if we are going to be spending this much money just on traveling alone, and we are seeing austerity measures, and you are saying that there needs to be other systems that are being put in place, what's the feasibility of that in this current financial year, given at the fact that right now you're seeing a government that is strapped when it comes to cash in some instances?
No, they need to make a plan. Just like when there was a crisis of COVID, a plan was made, because people need to understand how expensive illegal immigration is. You find that students, they can't, parents can't take their kids to school because some schools are overwhelmed by illegal foreigners. Similarly, if you go to the health system, there's been complaints, especially in Gauteng and Limpopo, with the MECs of health there, about how the health system is actually burdened. So if the illegal immigration is not addressed, it will become much more expensive than the 52 million that is spent now. That is why instead of just spending the money on deportations, let us work on a system that will deal with the root problem, the root causes of the problem, so that there is effective solutions to the problem of illegal immigration, not have a case whereby, because some of them, come December, they turn themselves to the Home Affairs to be deported. They come back again in January, which is, they're making a mockery of our country. So that is why the system must be effective to deal with such instances.
And I suppose another layer to this conversation would then resolve the issue that we are seeing in some of the townships, that people are saying that you do have now spaza shops that are unaccounted for. And in some of the instances, you don't even know who owns what spaza shop. And when there are problems there, you don't know which papers to go to in order to be able to hold somebody to account.
Definitely. Mrs. Bongi, it is a reckless government that allows people who are untraced, they are not even known where they come from, to be in charge of the food supply of our country, because the spaza shops that are all over the country, all over the townships and villages, those people that are running those spaza shops, no government entity can actually confidently say to the citizens, these people vetted them, they are compliant with our laws, but they're in charge of food supply to our country. Now, when we see instances of our children dying out of the foods they buy from these spaza shops, there's no accountability. We've been hearing about how many children are dying, but not once have we had a conversation to know how many of the spaza shop owners have been arrested. Now, it makes us to actually wonder, is the government not part of this deliberate action of actually poisoning South Africans? Because immediately allow people you don't even know where they come from to settle in the country illegally, be in charge of food supply. You cannot be surprised when people are dying. But the question is, what is the government doing?
Before I let you go, your take on this issue around the foreign policy and what we're seeing between the Democratic Alliance. We saw, of course, a tweet earlier on by the president's spokesperson, then the DA's Helen Zille as well.
No, I think EDA needs to choose whether they are in government or they are in opposition. Because we can't be in government, have a minister that is in government and contradict the very same president that he serves as a minister under. So if it was any party that is not part of the coalition of the ANC and the DA, it is well and good, because that is what is expected of opposition parties. But a party that is in government is expected to be mature, because we need to send out a clear message as South Africans to say this is our direction. Now, you can't have a minister speaking left and the president speaking right, and would want to encourage President Ramaphosa to take action on the DA, especially Steenhuisen, because he is undermining our country, is making our country to be a laughingstock if he is going to oppose the president.
All right, let me thank you so much for your time. To appreciate it. That is the ATM president, in fact, Vuyo Zungula.